So let's get started with our very first keynote speaker. He will tell us about sovereign cloud from Mirage to Epiphany. In this keynote, he will tell us how we should consider sovereign cloud, how it has moved actually from being a niche topic to becoming one of the most important facets of Europe's technological landscape today. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let us please welcome the VP of Engagement at GigaOm, Jon Collins.
Thank you. And I should start with a caveat on this whole thing. My daughter saw this photo and said, "Dad, you need to put a more recent photo up." And I was like, oh, awkward. So let's see. Okay. There we go. So here to talk about, it's a really interesting thing to talk about, a topic with no definition. And I've searched, and sovereignty in general is already quite ephemeral, and people have tried to lock it down. And then you get into sovereignty or as an adjective, sovereignty as a noun, sovereignty as a qualifier, etc., etc. But where we come from as an organization, I'll get into it a little bit, is how to help organizations actually take action. So that's really my starting point. And because I'm a modern person of the digital transformation world, I have cue cards. And then I saw you with an iPad, and I was thinking, wow, what a great invention. How cool. That's going to be crazy. So what I'm going to cover, pretty much standard presentation format, if I may, is let's look at some of the drivers, but the broader drivers of technological sovereignty, because that's really what we're looking down here. And then a little bit of a dabble into definitions, but maybe more on the impact side. What are the options for organizations? All the challenges arranged in order, and then actually how to take some action. But before I do that, a little bit about who the heck is GigaOm and who the heck am I? So GigaOm is an organization, it's an industry analyst firm. Think Gartner is the big one. Yep, those kinds of companies. We differentiate by hiring engineers rather than university-trained analysts. So we're people that have been in the trenches. I used to work in a network operations center at GCHQ. I've written books about security, so that's my background, and I'm getting, it's people that are still in the trenches that keep me fresh, because I can get rusty. So I try to stay sharp by speaking to organizations, finding out what their challenges are today, and then maybe helping them address them. But a lot of what we do, and it's an absolutely fascinating. I worked in Paris for Alcatel. I was running IT systems in Paris. And don't please ask me about Brexit, because it just makes me angry, and that's the end of the presentation. And it would be very sad for everybody. But when I was working in Paris, it was just really, really hard work. It was really, really challenging to get stuff right. And that's the kind of issues that organizations face today. But since then, the great thing about my job is I have time. Time is possibly the most valuable resource that anyone owns. You can't make it. You can't invent time. There's no machine that can create more time for us. So it's a hugely valuable resource. And most of the organizations we speak to, very, very smart people, room full of smart people here, smart men, smart women, and it's the biggest challenge that we all face is just we don't have the ability to stop and think. And that's what I have a huge privilege to be able to do. To wit, this picture, I just sat in a cafe and spent a couple of hours and just thought, what's technology going to be like? I did this in 2016, and here we are in 2024, and it's still reasonably accurate, but it's lacking one thing. And can anyone see what that is? Yeah. I literally realized this morning. AI, absolutely. It doesn't have the A or the I in there. Oh, is it?
Yeah, machine learning and AI.
Oh my God.
It's a bit small.
Well, I guess I lack the ability to buzz it up and kind of big it. Where even is that? Show me in the picture.
Right in the middle.
My goodness gracious, aren't I good? There we go. So, can I just rewind a bit? And you'll even see that back in 2016, I predicted. It's pretty good. Well done, me. So let's have a bit of a look at sovereignty. So 3 drivers, essentially, to sovereignty. And yet we all pretty much know the kind of the governmental drivers, if you like. It's a geopolitical thing. We've got the Cloud Act. We've got all this challenges of the hyperscalers, kind of not just the hyperscalers, but organizations where data is in a jurisdiction that then has control over data outside of that jurisdiction, and it gets very messy. All kinds of initiatives over the past 10, 15 years in France, in Germany, in Britain, when we were... Yeah, anyway. All parts of initiatives, and those carry on. But then we've also seen the kind of upswing of right through up to GDPR and onwards of the kind of personal privacy laws that have come in. And something that's really interesting to me, an epiphany I had 3 or 4 years ago was when I was speaking to a manufacturing company. They said, how hot, I did that standard thing. I said, so what's keeping you awake at night? It's a really easy party conversation with a senior CIO or something. So what's keeping you awake at night? And he said, sovereignty. And I was like, oh, what's that then? And he said, well, it's really hard for me to do business in Africa now as a French organization because I have to obey the laws, and it was with Nigeria. I have to obey Nigerian laws for data management as a supplier. And I've heard this too with organizations in the US, the big banks. They put these stipulations in the T's and C's, and suddenly there's all these extra hurdles you've got to jump through across the entire supply chain of services, of manufacturing, of whatever. So, and these are sort of buried in the RFP frameworks. It's just literally the bar is raising because of sovereignty. And then finally, the drivers are all it's my day job. It's that IT is evolving rapidly all the time. That's no surprise to anybody. We've got these massively complex multi-platform architectures. Yeah, I can throw in all the buzzwords like Kubernetes and cloud native and all that stuff at the same time as trying to manage all the traditional IT that we've got. We've got these hugely hybrid, messy environments. We've got data centricity challenges of, it's the kind of, remember when everyone talked about digital transformation, and it still kind of, it pops up from time to time. But ultimately, that was all about data. It was all about getting control of data. It was all about managing it in one place. So the automotive organizations that are very data-driven now, they're still trying to get on top of data quality and all the data management challenges. Cyber recovery, I mean, we saw with CrowdStrike that cybersecurity problems can come from cybersecurity companies. It's all about risk, and it's all about risk management. And then when you get to it, it's the old adage of it's not about losing something, it's about finding it again. So it's the recovery aspect that's far more important, other kinds of presentations, similar rooms to this one. It's, when did you last test your backups? Kind of questions. And then, I mentioned AI again. This time I did it on purpose, and it wasn't buried in my slide. So all those new workloads that are then driving challenges around data aggregation. One of the things I thought when GDPR came in was it was already too late, because it was already easy to use search to find out who someone was without knowing who that person was. And we're now 8 years later, something like that, I can't remember exactly. But now with AI, you can throw in, and I'm not a kind of AI evangelist, everything's, singularity is like next week. But with AI, with large language models, with search, et cetera, that it is much easier to identify people, to identify people's preferences and behaviors, and start being predictive in ways that and game people ways that people didn't really have planned. So those are the drivers that we're seeing, and all of it's a kind of there's a moment where the world blinked. That's the way I see it. It's essentially, it was like, hang on, is this what we wanted? And then suddenly, and I know I was speaking to someone last night, it's kind of, yes, of course, there's the kind of geopolitical aspects of kind of, we're duking it out at the high level between governments, et cetera. But I think just every single citizen on the planet is going, no, I'm not so sure about this. And we saw it with cloud itself back in again, 2010, 2011, 2012, cloud was going to be the thing. Journey to the cloud was the expression. I've always hated that expression, by the way, because it implies this nirvana, wonderful place where everything's just going to be perfect. And of course, that's not true. But organizations were adopting this kind of scorched earth strategy for cloud. Let's move everything to the cloud, like that was going to make everything better. What we're now seeing is organizations moving stuff back out of the cloud, repatriation. And I've only put this slide up just to say two things. One is, we do this data gathering stuff all the time, and this is one particular aspect. So we saw that 42% of organizations had already moved applications out of the cloud. They'd gone, nah, that was a really bad idea. That lifting and shifting that one into the cloud. 32% are currently moving applications, and 11% are considering moving applications. Only 16% have not done any of that. So, yeah, the staggering majority of organizations have blinked. They've gone, let's just stop and think about what we're doing here. And then we take into account the fact other data that we've collected. Only 25% roughly of applications were moved into the cloud anyway. So there's this idea, 12 years on from when cloud started happening, that everything would be in the cloud. Ain't going to happen. One particular piece of data that we've just done some survey work, we found that roughly 45% of organizations had a hybrid cloud strategy, i.e. a mix of legacy, virtual, cloud-based stuff. But 25% more, now hang on, I've got the data wrong. Let's remember this. It's about 35% had a strategy for it. About 55% actually had that as their architecture, which means that there's 20% that were doing hybrid cloud by accident. It's that 20% that I've definitely got right. 20% were not meaning to be hybrid, but had ended up that way anyway. So we're all in this kind of chaotic, should it be in, should it be in, out, shake it all about kind of, did I just really do that in front of a room full of professionals? I'm really sorry. But we're all in this world where we're not getting everything right. We're trying to do one thing. We're pulling out. We're trying to work it out. And then sovereignty is trying to fit into all of that. So defining sovereignty. I'm going to have to move faster, aren't I? So defining sovereignty. Oh no, I've literally got a countdown here. That's brilliant. Technology, it's just staggering, isn't it? 1837. I guess I better get a move on. So sovereignty. Very much, everyone kind of knows what it is. And that was interestingly with digital transformation. You didn't have to ask a board what digital transformation was. They knew they needed to do it. They knew they needed to get more data-centric, etc. But if you try to lock a definition down, everything fell apart. Because knowing something in your soul, somewhere around here, was far more important than actually being able to write it down in detail. And that's pretty much where we are with sovereignty. We've got jurisdictional sovereignty, this whole kind of, countries want to be in charge of their countries. That's kind of pretty reasonable. But then it's countries also want to not have people from the outside do bad things to them. And we're seeing a lot of that, and I think with Ukraine and so on and so forth, it was this kind of, oh, wait. So this blinking became more of a rapid eye movement thing. And then finally, the other factor is that we realized we were giving away the farm. So countries all over the world are going, hang on, so we are going to be entirely dependent on everyone else for everything that we do. Not sure about that. And so that kind of having central competencies in country has become hugely important. And that's the kind of sovereignty aspect, the sovereignty as a noun. The sovereignty as a qualifier. So we've got digital sovereignty, we've got technological sovereignty, we've got data sovereignty. That's more about wanting security and control over our technological assets. It's about having not just and this is where it gets complicated with some of the hyperscaler definitions of what sovereignty means. It's about having your own people that are then citizens of that country that are running the systems. So, and these things, a lot of this can be dealt with through vetting, et cetera, but it is about having that vetting. It is about having those policies that you are actually saying who's able to access your data. And that becomes hugely important. And then we're seeing local provision. And it does come back to both that having local competencies. People just don't want third parties absolutely in control of everything. And I'm going to mention CrowdStrike again, because it's a really good non-sovereign example of what can happen where things go wrong. We were talking last night about the Swiss cheese theory of risk. Do you know what that is? It's really cool. So it's when all the holes line up that the problem happens. That's why the space shuttle fell out of the sky. It wasn't one thing, it was lots of different things that all went wrong at the same time. And that's what happened with CrowdStrike. And with CrowdStrike, two things went wrong that were entirely down to idiocy. The first was they didn't have decent enough testing processes internally. No excuses. No excuses whatsoever. But the second was that organizations said, yes, it's absolutely fine that you will change stuff running on our servers, our laptops, our flight screens, everything else, in order that you do your job and we get no control over that. And we are contracted to do that. Doesn't make any sense. Those contracts are changing. But those are the kinds of things that line up that then when something goes wrong, it goes all the way down through the Swiss cheese. So that's the kind of sovereignty as a qualifier. And then sovereign as an adjective. It's sovereign cloud. It's sovereign technology. It's about getting the stack right. So in techie terms, we talk about the lowest levels of the stack, right down to the networking, and then we move up into the infrastructure, and then it's the databases, and then up into the applications, and then the user interface. So that's the stack. You've got to have sovereignty all the way down. It's like the Stephen Hawking story of there is no God. The old lady came up to him at the end. Sorry, this is a bit of a digression, but the old lady came up to him at the end of a presentation and said, all of that quantum stuff, that's rubbish, isn't it? Everyone knows that the Earth is balanced on a turtle. And he said, but what's the turtle standing on? And she said, it's turtles all the way down. So, but it's sovereignty all the way down. You won't forget that one. And that means, yes, it's about the architecture, but it's also about setting a strategy that has sovereignty as a layer through it, like a stick of rock. And it's about having sovereignty built into all of our practices, policies, working environments, et cetera, et cetera. Otherwise, you get the Swiss cheese problem. And sovereignty, like security, if there's a risk, because ultimately sovereignty is an anti-problem. You don't care about sovereignty, you care about what happens when sovereignty isn't there. It becomes a permeability issue. So the lack of sovereignty means things can happen that you weren't planning, that can get in any which way that you've left the holes open. So what choices do we have as organizations, as enterprises, as governments, as public sector organizations, as private organizations, big organizations, small organizations, etc.? Not going to lie, sat with the designers several different ways to draw this picture, and we came up with what we think. So what this is showing, I hate saying that. I'm going to start again, because you never say, what I'm trying to say on this slide is that what this slide shows is how we now have this concept called traditional cloud. And that's the middle bar, straight down the middle. That's kind of zero. Everything is at a certain level of value. So then we've got options of how we apply sovereignty. We've got three choices. We can either use a sovereign hyperscaler, and these models are coming. We've got AWS, should be due next year, I think. They'll have their sovereign cloud platform. Azure's already got its sovereign cloud environments up and running, I think. Different vendors, Google, Oracle, etc., have got different ways of approaching sovereignty, but generally they're all in that sovereign hyperscaler bucket. So from an integrity perspective, how much can you feel confident that your data is being respected, that it is being managed properly, et cetera, et cetera? Sovereign hyperscaler does push you a bit further, but a localized provider gets you that much further. And I think that's one of the topics of today, is how local MSPs can manage people's data much more in country, et cetera, et cetera. So I've given that 2 points. for that. But then obviously the on-premise firewalls if you just keep it under your desk, it's going to be as sovereign as anything. And it's the old adage when I worked in security of the most secure data is on a hard drive, encased in concrete, buried in the ground. No one's going to ever touch that. So yeah, sure, that may be an option, but realistically, come on. Everything's a compromise between doing that and actually wanting to share data. And it's a bit like, if I wanted to check my bank balance here, or if in Tokyo, or somewhere completely different, I want to do that as a consumer. So suddenly, sovereignty kind of goes out of the window because I've chosen that I want to bring my data in some way over into Tokyo. Everything falls apart. We've got to have these compromises. And then security as well. I think, sure, all of those options give a lot of benefits over the hyperscaler, but it's pretty much of a muchness in terms of, and also that security is a messy, messy space, and everyone's jostling for position in terms of what security features are available, how security is managed, is it event management, et cetera, et cetera. And then cost, it goes the other way. So those arrow colors are changed. That's wrong, isn't it? But the sovereign hyperscaler is on the top, so it's more expensive. A localized provider is less expensive, but not by so much. And then the on-premise firewall, as I said, is much, much more expensive. Apologies for the color inaccuracy there. I didn't spot that when we were doing it. So those are the options that we've got. And as I say, it's all about, ultimately, Roger Davis, who I used to work with as a business consultant when I was doing the security consulting, said, mate, it's all about benefits minus costs, isn't it? It's value. Value, that's what matters. Benefits minus costs. Everything ultimately boils down to that equation. It's what are we trying to get out of this and how much are we prepared to spend on it? And organizations always have limited resources to spend on whatever they're doing. So we've got to find those compromises and decide what's the best way forward for that. And then we've got to deliver. A cliche of delivery challenges. Let's work through some cliches. We've got locking the stable door after the horse has bolted, because we already have open architectures. You can't just go, well, let's just stop it all. Ain't going to happen. And it's icebergs. It goes. There's much bigger problems under the surface than you can see on the top. Those are the realities that people in IT departments are dealing with today. Again, remember the thing about time? They can't just go, oh, I know, let's just stop, start from scratch again, rebuild, migrate all the data that we had into a perfect new environment. Even if we did that, technology's already moved on, and that's what vendors often tell us. Oh, just stop and restart with this new data warehouse we've got. But when you're halfway through building that thing, the next things come along. That we know that. We've been doing this for 40 years now. Black holes and blind spots. It's the legislation itself is changing all the time. It's evolving. It never quite keeps up. When I was working with people that were doing the fintech regulation and so on and so forth, it's always behind the curve, regulation. There's lovely graphs that show just how far behind the curve it is. But that's trying to keep up as well. And then, and I've kind of mentioned this before, it's the having the cake and eating it. Everything is a compromise. We're never working with infinite resources. We're never working with infinite technological resources. We don't have infinite money. We don't have infinite time. Certainly don't have infinite time. And then finally, it's a burning platform. So we're building something and we have limited time to do it, because if we don't get it right, there's going to be another CrowdStrike, or there's going to be another crash, or there's going to be another this or another that. So we're always running out of time. And we're trying to do it on a move. We're trying to build something, replace the wheels on a moving train. You can't just stop it, as I said. And then finally, this notion of putting all our eggs in one basket. We spoke to organizations, maybe there's organizations here, who actually adopted, and I heard this phrase from our clients, the scorched earth cloud policy. They said, the board said, move everything to the cloud. Just do it all. Get rid of all those data centers. We don't want them anymore. Get rid of them. Didn't work. Really bad idea. Really bad idea for all these reasons. So just pushing everything into one set of solution providers is never going to work for 1,000 reasons, and it's a bad idea even if it would work. So how do we do it? 6 minutes, 20 seconds. I love this clock. It's great. The answer is my super glib answer, which always comes down to, I said this last night, and apologies for repeating myself, it always comes down to governance. It always comes down to policy. It always comes down to deciding what we're trying to do before we do it. And you can do that. When I do project audits, complete large-scale infrastructure project failures or software audits where people are building things and it's gone out of control, you always start at the beginning. Even if you spend half an hour, you go, what were we trying to build in the first place? Then, how were we trying to build it? Then, what does the design look like? And generally, you find the point pretty quick, within hours, of where the problem first started to manifest. And similarly, we talk about security by design. We talk about getting things right. We talk about shift left in software terms. It's all about deciding what you're trying to do before you do it. And that's the governance aspect. I then sandwich that between manageability and controls, because the poor people in the operations centers then need to run this stuff. And you can't just throw stuff at them. I remember a conversation I had with an operations director. He said, those people out there have no idea what it's like in here. And it's absolutely true. The wheels are falling off, fires are burning all the time, problems are happening all the time. The people who are actually running the technology need to be taken into account. They need visibility and control. And then the security aspect, of course, sovereignty and security are very close bedfellows. And that goes across the data, that goes across the infrastructure, and as I mentioned, that goes across the operations. And by infrastructure, I noticed my good friends at IDC, Naz, mentioned, Revelation, we've just discovered that networking is also an aspect of this, 100%, absolutely. It's the stack, it goes all the way down. It's the turtles. So, to summarize, sovereignty is now and forever. That sounds like a big... I love the Britney mic, so it's great, isn't it? I nearly broke into song, but then I was told I wasn't allowed to. So I didn't. But the sovereignty is now and forever, 100%. It always was. We took our eyes off that ball for a while. We know what it is in our hearts, and we need to deliver on it through governance. And the more that we do that, the better off we'll be. Simple as that. It's multi-platform. We're in this world where we have multiple different types of technology running. That's never going to change. It's just going to get more complicated. These days, we're looking at edge computing. We're looking at nanotechnology. Are we really? Forget the nanotechnology. Everything's getting smaller still. But we're looking at AI. We're looking at all these different ways that technology continues to evolve. We need to put sovereignty as the first part of the conversation, not leave it until the end. It used to be security that was kind of, I suppose we better find out if it's secure, once we're at the testing stage. Should we do some security testing? It's a little bit too late. Sovereignty needs to be treated in the same way. Put it in up front. As I was thinking through this slide, sovereignty as code, why not? Let's start to build in those policies as part of our codification of what we're trying to build, as opposed to leaving it far too high up in bits of paper that we talk about how we're going to do this. So let's put sovereignty actually into the code that we're writing. Business models ultimately, it's businesses that have those compromises. If you speak to, a lot of business happens on the golf course. Business leaders understand risk, and they are making those risk compromises all the time. And sometimes they play really fast and loose with a lot of these things. That's their job. If they get it wrong, the company crashes. If they get it right, the company does extremely well and does better than the competition. So that's the business job. If you're in the public sector, obviously you don't have quite that. But again, the way that the public sector is organized is also driving those sovereignty needs. Sovereignty can't be this kind of noose or this manacle around your leg. It has to be something that enables business to happen. And for that to be true, we need to have a clear picture of what sovereignty is actually meaning, not in terms of, I've now got a definition, but I need a dashboard. I need a sovereignty dashboard for my organization that says, did you know 28% or 58% or 98% of your data is being controlled by people that you have no control over? I need to know that. It's a simple question. Just give me that data, and then I can decide as a business leader what I want to do about that. That's my choice running that organization. And then finally, it's the kind of the glib borrow from security. It does then become a business asset, though. Organizations that are able to run sovereign environments are then better protected. They're providing better experiences for their customers. They're providing better ability to work with their partners, and they're actually on top of what they're doing. It's really interesting. I see that a lot of the things that we're talking about here are actually, it's what we would have wanted to get right anyway. All of that visibility, all of that control. It's not about locking things down. It's about giving ourselves the ability to progress as organizations, as public sector, private sector organizations, and work together within the societies that we form. So there we go. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jon, for this insightful and also entertaining first keynote. So thank you for opening the day that way. I have seen a lot of people taking notes, so really nice. And we also have great interaction in the Q&A chat here. So while you prepare your questions, I will start with the first one from the audience online. First one is, does a sovereign cloud mean a limited cloud? In other words, if you over-localize, will you lose out on the innovation potential of public cloud?
There are two questions there, and they contradict each other. So the first thing is, it's all about those compromises, and therefore we have to be on top of the compromises. If you push everything into the public cloud or keep everything set local, you are not in control. You are just assuming that other people are managing it for you. So the second part of the question is, yes, you can. So the answer is yes, you can limit yourself if you go too far in one direction or too far in the other direction, which is why you need to have that picture of what value you're getting out of both sides and then make the right responsible decisions.
Linking back to what you were saying in the keynote, indeed. This was a question from a person called Rahil Nasir. So thank you very much to this person.
Oh, Naz. I literally... Hi, Naz.
Okay, great. That's perfect. So thank you so much for your question. I will take a question from the audience here in person, if there is one, before we move back online. Yes, we have a question over there. Sir, can we have your first name?
Yeah, James from Red Hat.
James.
Hi.
James.
Good starter of a day, so thanks very much. You talked about repatriation, and it sounds to me, if you look at the Commission's goals on moving to the cloud, they still have this 75% goal of going into the public cloud. So could you kind of elaborate a little bit more about perhaps a possible course correction? Maybe the target has to be more 75% in open hybrid cloud, as opposed to rushing into the public cloud. And then also this word open, just how important getting the definition of open right in terms of open source. Thanks.
Okay, so 75%, let's deal with that one first. It's a great aspiration to have this figure onto a way of... I need to break down the definition of public cloud. That doesn't mean hyperscalers, for a start. The public cloud means let's get something into someone else's managed data centers that we then don't have to manage ourselves. And it's outsourcing, it's offshoring, it's all those waves that we've gone through. I think when you break it down into the layers that we're talking about here, what even does that 75% mean? Are we talking about the workloads? Are we talking about the infrastructure? If we look at the way that public cloud has gone, organizations are currently spending roughly double what they should have been. So is that 75% now costing us twice as much? There's many ways of unpacking that. And rather than saying, is it right or is it wrong, I would say we should be looking at each workload. It should be done on a workload basis. And say, let's say you've got 10,000 workloads. So for each of those workloads, you have a stack. And you should be building a platform under 75% of those workloads that then is managed in a way that isn't coming down to you. But the workload, so it becomes a platform argument, not a public cloud argument. 75% onto a massively scaled platform, 100%. I'm up for that. 75% into the public cloud. I don't know quite what that means, because we've seen that happening, and it just becomes more and more expensive, which is why FinOps has come out as such a big topic. I think them building on top of that, the controls that we need to put are on the workloads themselves. So run on public storage, run on public data management, et cetera, but then the higher up you get into that stack, and that's where AI starts to be. Are they your models, or are they someone else's models? Is it your data? Are they your insights, et cetera, et cetera? And that's where I think I start to kind of balk a little bit. So the lower, you shouldn't be laying your own fiber. 100%, no one should do that. And then every level you go higher, the more you should be taking control, until you're right up at the user experience and the personal security and the personal privacy, and that should be your control entirely, however that's being managed. Does that make sense as an answer? Say again? And the open source. I think there's huge debates in the open source community about what open source means now. And I think Red Hat, obviously, you've got a vested interest there, a good vested interest, let's say. I'm just thinking of the work with Open UK and Amanda Brock, and I've spoken to her about this. It's getting shared source models built transparently using GitHub, whatever, and giving us the ability to create as a world. Fantastic. The issues start to come in with the licensing, with the who's paying for it, with the et cetera, and that's where the compromises start having to happen. So a lot of the work that's happening in the cloud native world, as you know, is open source based, and I think that's driven huge innovation, absolutely massive innovation. I mentioned Kubernetes before, but all the Istios and everything else, they're all open source based. Which is fantastic. So can open source help was kind of the question. The answer is yes, absolutely, to drive innovation. But I think this whole room is about making sure we stay in control, and that's where the compromise. That's where the line has to be drawn.
Thank you very much for your question, James. We'll take one more question from the chat. If you have some that you haven't had the chance to submit now, you can still submit it in the chat, and we will answer it later on with pleasure. Last question for you, Jon. Do you think, and this question is from Neil Moss, do you think sovereignty is only a large enterprise issue?
No.
Thank you very much for your answer.
It affects, there is no such thing as a large enterprise at that point. It affects every single person. It affects it's a citizen issue. So it affects every single user. It affects every single employee. It affects every single size of company, because often even the smallest companies trying to provide services to the largest companies. And if they can do so in a way that says, yes, we're managing your data in a way that is sovereign, then it's back to the T's and C's thing. They're already able to get over that hurdle, even as a small company.
That answers the question. Thank you very much, Jon, for your intervention. And we are moving on to the second keynote. Thank you, Jon.
No problem.